Good afternoon, sir.
So it's sharp 5:30 p.m. and let us proceed. So today we shall take up monitoring of public policy, which is covered under Unit 15 of the study material. Monitoring of public policy. So monitoring is an important aspect of every activity. If we want to achieve a goal or a target through a task, that task must be monitored phase-wise, stage-wise in a gradual manner till the completion. So when there is effective monitoring, the successful outcome can be a near possibility. The successful outcome can be a near possibility. So also in case of public policy. Public policies also need to be monitored from time to time so that the real goal of policy can be materialized or can be realized. Sorry. So here we know public policy is an important activity, and this is we can say this is for the realization of different goals or different objectives for the betterment of society, for the betterment of individuals. And we have examined examples like education policy or defense policy, or that is, we can say, for eradication of poverty. So there are different types of policies which are undertaken in public capacity or by the state. So when we are preoccupied with, or when our main objective is to examine public policy, so this is obviously a direct reference to the different or the varieties of policies which are issued or declared by the state from time to time in order to realize the goal of development. So, unless we approach the different developmental goals through policies, the realization of those developmental goals will not be possible. Now, so what is monitoring and how that monitoring is done? So, effective monitoring can ensure the proper execution of policy with expected results. So, effective monitoring can ensure the proper execution of policy. We knew that public policy goes through different stages: policy making, policy execution or implementation, then comes policy evaluation, etc. So, execution, that means when the policy is being executed or put into reality, put into practice, or actual work begins. A policy with expected results, and every policy has a goal. So, when that goal is realized, we can say the expected results are achieved. But if we fall short of that goal, then obviously something might have gone wrong, as a result of which we fail to accomplish the goal or we fail to realize the objectives of the policy. So monitoring is an activity which occurs in the course of implementing a program or a policy. That means monitoring is done while the implementation process is in use or the implementation process is in vogue. And monitoring can be through different mechanisms. Policy monitoring has come to mean the process of observing the progress of policy implementation and the resource utilization and anticipating deviations from policy expectations. So, policy implementation, the resource utilization, and articulating deviations. So, these are the different step by step processes. That means policy statement, that statement is only in the form of pen and paper. Then that has to be translated into action. So, that is known as implementation. And implementation will be possible only when there are sufficient resources, because without resources, main money, material, main money, material are the resources. So, or generally in public administration, we also call it human and material resources. So, human and material resources are vital in case of every public policy implementation or formulation, implementation, execution, and final outcome or realization. So its implications are that management takes steps to ensure that all activities related to policy implementation are completed within the given time and budget. Every policy has a time frame. So we set a goal that we are going to achieve the target within 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, like this. So time frame. Second is budget. There must be a financial provision. Without finance, no administration can run. No administrative task can be fulfilled. So now let us come to examine the monitoring can be defined as the process of inducing action for adherence to schedule. Adherence to schedule. That means how much we are successful in sticking to the program. Adherence to the schedule means every policy framework or every policy objective is divided into different schedules. Schedules means, say for example, if it is a 1 year policy, then we divide it into different quarters. Or if it is a 5 year policy, then we can divide it into schedules of single years. 1 year, then 2 years, then three, four, five. So after 1 year, what has been the rate of progress? After 2 years, what has been the extent of progress? After 3 years, what has been the extent of progress involving the utilization of the resources, etc. So this is, we can say, the process of inducing action for adherence to schedule. How far we are sticking to the schedule, sticking to the plans. Schedule means the plan which has been designed before, which has been framed before, and the process of inducing action. That means how you are actually taking up the responsibility of putting the policy into action. Now there are some assumptions behind the process of monitoring. Our assumptions are policy program is measurable in terms of certain indicators or desired objectives. So every policy or program is measurable, that can be measured, that can be measured in terms of certain indicators or desired objectives. So there are certain indicators on the basis of which every policy can be measured. Say for example, what has been the extent of progress at a certain stage. So that will indicate you or that will show you what is actually the rate of progress, whether it is up to the plan or not, or it is falling short of the plan or exceeding the plan. So that is indicator. And they can be also, there can on the basis of also desired objectives. Every policy has one or a set of objectives or goals. Every policy attempts to achieve certain goals. So that objective, whether has been successfully realized or not, that can be shown or that can be known from these indicators. Second assumption is personal responsibility for the program performance exists at all levels in the organization. Personnel responsibility. That means responsibility of different persons who are directly involved in the execution of the policy. So persons can be of different types. Some are working at the senior levels, some are at the middle levels, some are at the lower levels, and every person or every person who has been used in a project or in a program or in a policy has certain responsibility, and that personnel or that person is responsible for doing his or completing his share of responsibility. So everybody can be fixed or responsibility can be fixed. Suppose there are 10 persons in a project. 10 persons are divided with different responsibilities, and here everybody is answerable to the boss or to the chief of the organization or the head of the policy division to answer what has been the extent of progress or how he has or she has discharged the responsibility in connection with the designated task. Third is adequacy of time for monitoring is ensured. Always there is a time limit. We cannot go beyond the stipulated time because that is not prudent management. So if you want the policy to be realized or policy to be fulfilled, successful, then obviously we will have to complete the entire assignment, complete the entire job within the stipulated time. Without time frame or without a set time limit, no policy is ever implemented or uh, designed. So every policy has a time frame, whether it is to be completed within a period of 5 years or 10 years. Of course, long-term projects are rare. Short-term projects, they require a short duration of time, and within that time, the policy has to be successfully implemented. So, adequacy of time, that means what is actually the time needed to complete the task. If it is possible to be implemented within 1 year, then it must be completed within 1 year. If it is to be within 2 years, likely so. So these are the, that means there must be very prudent management of time. Neither one, if it is completed before time, well and good. Sometimes if some projects, some policies are completed ahead of time, which is very rare. That example is very rare. Some program or some action being accomplished ahead of time is unusual or is very rare. But time escalation is quite normal. or quite rather we can say time escalation, cost escalation, ମାନେ time ବଢିଯିବା, cost ବି ବଢିଯିବା, ଖର୍ଚ୍ଚ ବଢିଯିବ, ସମୟ ବି ବଢିଯିବ. That is quite natural. So a policy designed for a period of 1 year may be extended to 1.5 years, or it may go up to 2 years. Sometimes even policies may also stretch uh, to some indefinite time. That must not be there. Adequate time. Adequate means exactly the amount of time which is essential for completing the job. That is adequate. Neither short nor long. There are proper tools for identifying deviations from program performance. Proper tools for identifying deviations. So what has been the deviation? Okay, every task is broken up into parts and every task is assigned to a designated person so that monitoring can be easy, so that easily it can be assessed, easily it can be known what that man has actually done within that given time frame or what was actually assigned to him or her. That is, there are proper tools for identifying deviations. If anybody or if any task is deviating from the path, deviating from the goal, then that must be arrested. Otherwise, it will result in time and cost escalation. So that is for granted. That can be taken for granted. So that is why there must be identification of deviations from program performance. How far the program is performing, how far it is sticking to the limit, all these things must be monitored within the organization or within the policy framework. Last assumption is provision exists for adjustments which correct the deviations from planned expectations outcomes. Adjustment. Everywhere there is, we can say, policy of adjustment. If we do not allow such amount of flexibility, that limit little amount of flexibility, then it will not be possible to do any work. Mind it. In every case, there is flexibility. We cannot be rigid. If we are rigid, if the bosses are rigid, if the managers are rigid, they seldom succeed in achieving the tasks. Those who are very rigid, they sometimes encounter very stiff opposition from the subordinates. And rigidity, of course, bosses must be assertive, but rigidity is also very unproductive. That is why there must be sufficient amount of flexibility. That is known as adjustment. If something has gone wrong, let us try to rectify it. That is adjustment. If the resources are not available, let us manage for some time so that, or let us uh, channelize the information network in such a manner that those who are in charge of allocation of resources will be induced to do so, or they will uh, conform to the requirement of the uh, situation or the task or the organization or the goal. So now there are certain approaches to policy monitoring. Managerial approach is one of them. So public sector has now adopted more or less business-like style, the techniques of which were once brought, thought of as private sector methods. That means previously there was an increasing assumption that public sector is not as competent, as efficient as the private sector. So private sector stood for efficiency and public sector stood for idleness, non-performance, lethargy, uh, not completing the project on time. So there were so many accusations against public sector undertakings. But with the change of time, with the passage of time, adequate changes have been made. And now, because of the long-standing loss-making nature of the public sector enterprises, different, we can say, uh, um, different approaches, rectifications, corrections were made in the different uh, organizations. Why? Because there was a huge amount of losses, huge amount of money were spent in different public sector organizations or undertakings, but commensurate result was not achieved. The result could not be achieved, the goals could not be fulfilled, resources or money went down the drain, and there were, we can say, uh, public sectors were defamed. Public sector enterprises or organizations were defamed. So that caused a reawakening or rethinking, and that rethinking ultimately led the experts to reorient their approach. So they wanted to bring about change in the work culture of the different public sector enterprises. So they found that these public sector workers, they need proper orientation in order to perform in a business-like manner. Business-like manner performance is usually available in case of private enterprises. So private enterprises, they try to make maximum utilization of the resources with maximum positive outcome. That is why you might have heard that most private sector enterprises, they are more successful, they are more profiteering, whereas public sector enterprises were known for huge losses or inefficiency, non-performance, non-fulfillment of targets. All these diseases were associated with public enterprises. But how long? There is always a limit, and public exchequer cannot bear the cost. So, where from the money will come to be diverted down the drain? That is why there was rethinking, and many experts, they wanted to redesign the work culture, the management culture prevailing in the public sector enterprises. As a result of which, these techniques or tools were increasingly made use of within the public sector enterprises in order to bring about a turn around. Okay, so some styles of performance or styles of functioning within the private sector were attempted to be borrowed into the public sector enterprises. Attempted to be borrowed into the public sector enterprises. And these were uh, very component parts of these approaches, that is, approaching monitoring, policy monitoring approaches. So, policy monitoring was also considered as one of the techniques or one of the skills which needed to be revamped, needed to be reoriented, redesigned so as to bring about efficiency within the functioning of these public sector enterprises. And this managerial approach wanted to bring about a business like style, the techniques of which were once thought of as private sector methods or private sector monopoly. And among them, there were techniques like CPM and PERT. CPM is critical path method, which is commonly in management jargon or administrative jargon. It is known as CPM, which stands for critical path method, and PERT or PUT, that stands for program evaluation and review technique. So these are some of the techniques which were available in private sector, and they were found to be very much successful in bringing about the desired results. So these techniques were also borrowed into the public enterprises. So CPM stands for addressing the issues of material and resource use in the most efficient manner. So the main objective of CPM and PUT, or critical path management, critical path method, and also your program evaluation and review techniques, they were mainly with this objective. What is that? Issues of addressing the issues of material and resource use, how the material and the resources are being used in the most efficient manner. So if at all materials and resources are being used in any enterprise, they must be done so with efficient manner, in efficient manner, most efficient manner. Okay, use of resources, for example, expenditure, monetary expenditure, that is also use of resource. So if a project has been assigned to spend 1 lakh rupees, then that must be spent in the most efficient manner, not in a haphazard or careless manner. So this is done through these techniques. The aim of CPM and PERT is to control the execution of policy program by controlling the network of activities and events which compose the stages of policy implementation. So there are different stages of policy implementation, and each stage has to be properly monitored so the rate of progress can be known. Rate of progress can be easily identified. The most probable duration, the shortest forecast of duration, and the longest forecast of duration. So this is about the program evaluation and review technique. Here, program evaluation and review technique depends on mostly the time management issue or time management factor. So here, most probable duration, what is actually the longest period that can be possibly spent or possibly utilized for the realization of the goals or the policies, or the shortest forecast of duration, what can also be the shortest possible forecast, future prediction. That is, forecast means predicting something in advance as far as the time factor is concerned. In how short a time an organization or a certain set of manpower can be successful in achieving the task, and also the longest forecast of duration. What can also be the longest possible time that can be uh, accorded or that can be given to the accomplishment of certain goals in matters of certain policies. Okay, so here then comes the PPBS, or Planning, Programming, Budgeting System. These are all practices which were prevailing in the private sector, and they were found to be successful in those sectors. Such activities were attempted to be borrowed into the public sector. Okay, so here Planning, Programming, Budgeting System, or PPBS, this approach seeks to set clear goals. Goal setting, obviously we do it quite naturally, because without goal setting we cannot uh, uh, go ahead in accomplishing a task. So goal setting, what is my goal within a given time frame and within how much possible time I am going to accomplish that task. That is goal setting. Then outputs, what is actually coming out in the form of, we can say, different deliveries or deliverables by the system or by the public sector enterprise, and values in the budgetary process. What are actually the values? Values doesn't mean the value in terms of money. Values means actually which are the preferential goals, preferential objectives that are attempted to be achieved within the policy framework, and to create a system of analysis and review. So you analyze the whole task and review it, re-examine it, re-observe it, whether it has been in accordance with the plans uh, or allocation of resources or the time schedule, etc., etc., in which the costs and benefits, mind you, costs and benefits of a policy program would be calculated over several years. So the main objective in this technique, that is PPBS, programming, planning, programming, budgeting system, is mainly advantageous for ensuring a cost benefit analysis. What is the cost involved in the implementation of the policy, and what is the benefit that can be derived from the implementation of the policy? Because every policy is aimed at giving us certain benefits. If those benefits are not successfully achieved or successfully reaped, then that is useless or that is meaningless. And such policies will be definitely getting a bad reputation. So that is the thing. Charles Schulz, who is associated with the advancement of the model, that is PPBS, observes that PPBS subjects programs to competition from alternative and more effective or efficient programs. So it brings competition. Charles Schulz believed that PPBS brings competition into the enterprise or into the activities. Obviously, when you operate in a competitive atmosphere, you automatically try to give your best. Suppose you are competing among your friends in a class. So obviously, you will, if you are motivated, if you are interested to do better than the others, you will try to give some extra into your preparation. So that is the result of competition. So when you are embarking on a competition, when you are involved in a competition, obviously you tend to give some extra energy, some extra, um, we can say, effort into the realization of the goals. Competition from alternative and more effective or efficient programs. So that also helps us in identifying which programs are more effective and efficient. That is the contribution of the PPBS method. Now coming to the third type of, we can say, monitoring technique or monitoring skill, that is known as activity bar chart. Activity bar chart. For monitoring technical program performance of a policy, the activity bar chart can be mapped. That means this is appropriate in case of technical performances. Say, for example, any engineering job, any automobiles industry, or we can say the railways. So there are so many areas in which these technical activities are performed, and activity bar chart is helpful in monitoring the technical type of activities or technical type of works. So activity bar chart can be mapped. It is an important device for monitoring policy performance as it projects expectations for policy results. Expectations for policy results. What is the expectation? What is the policy result? Because every policy makes us expectant or makes us to expect what can be the possible outcome of the policy or possible outcome from the policy, and then the policy results, what ultimately comes as the result of such type of policies. The activity bar chart plans each technical activity by time and deliverables. By time and deliverables. What can be possibly delivered? That is deliverable. And time. What is the time needed in order to provide or in order to cater to such type of deliverables or to complete a job? In simple terms, in simple language, we can say that this is helpful in knowing or in ascertaining within what time a particular task can be successfully completed or accomplished. It shows the dates. So this is the technique. In activity bar chart, there will be dates. Suppose April, 1st of April, this task will be completed. 5th of April, this task will be completed. 10th of April, 15th, this way. So that is, we can say, it shows the dates by which deliverables should be completed, date-wise classification. And for example, an activity bar chart can be developed for a housing policy designed to replace urban slums with low-cost housing. So this is an example. This is just an example to make us understand the process in a little bit clearer manner. So while there are some policies in the direction of, we can say, housing development or housing provision, such type of uh, activity bar chart is more better used of or used in a more appropriate manner, because housing policy also needs to be completed within a given time frame, within a given set of time, and the entire time is broken down into different phases. Okay, whether month wise or date wise. Date wise means obviously it is with a gap of short duration, maybe with a gap of longer duration, whatever it is. That depends on the convenience of the planners or the convenience to the organization. Then there is systems approach. Systems approach, which was actually popularized by David Easton. That is, the main objective of monitoring is to ensure that resource inputs are used in such ways as to generate the highest quality of policy outputs. Resource input, policy output. So here money, material resources are spent in a project or in a policy, and they are, when they are being spent or they are being utilized, obviously they are expected to give some result. ପଇସା ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଖର୍ଚ୍ଚ କରୁଛେ ନିଶ୍ଚୟ କିଛିଟା ଉଦ୍ଦେଶ୍ୟରେ ସେ ଉଦ୍ଦେଶ୍ୟ ପରିପୂରଣ ହେଲା କି ନା, so that is result. So that is so resource utilization or resource input and policy output. So when we spend some resources, obviously what comes out as the output or ultimate, we can say, uh, performance of the policy process, how it is going to help us. Here, structuring in policy work can involve both the structuring of the organization and structuring of the policy program itself. Structuring means detailed planning, detailed planning of the organization, detailed planning of the task. So the entire organization will be structured in a clear cut manner. That means whose responsibility is to do what. Okay. So because we know within every organization there are personnel of different types. Some are generalists, some are technicians, some are managers. Okay. So this way there are different varieties of performers or varieties of, we can say, uh, workers, and every worker has a certain share of responsibility. So the structuring of the organization and structuring of the policy. Policy is also broken down into different tidbits, different divisions, different sections, parts. So policy will be divided into parts. Organization will be divided into different structural units so that monitoring of the task can be quite easy, quite possible. Carter and his associates suggest that a successful implementation of system involves four types of control. So systems approach believes in four types of control. One is coordination over time. Coordination over time. That means what is the time given to complete a task and what can be the best possible coordination over that entire period. Suppose a task has been given to be completed within a period of 5 years. So the entire 5 year period that has to be uh, coordinated in a proper manner so that there is no question of extension of that time limit. Okay, then coordination at particular time. So what is actually the time at hand or time in hand? That means what one is doing at a given particular time on day one or day two, day three, like this. So that is coordination at particular time. Then detailed logistics and scheduling. Detailed logistics. The entire process of, we can say, transportation, that is logistics. Transportation of human material resources starting from the beginning of the process or beginning of the policy till the end of it. So that is control over the logistics. Third is your detailed logistics and scheduling. Scheduling means planning a time frame schedule, whether it is broken down into months or broken down into years or broken down into quarters, like this. And four, defending and maintaining structural boundaries. So there must be proper boundary. Structural boundary. Structural boundary means every organization has its different structures. Say, for example, there is a technical division, there is a budget division, or there is, we can say, so every organization is divided into different structures. And all those structures, they must be properly coordinated with each other in order to accomplish the task. So then comes another approach, that is formative approach. Formative approach. According to this approach, monitoring starts with a schedule and works for the success of a policy program when it is being implemented. So it starts with a schedule. Schedule means it's a program of action, how you plan to accomplish the task in terms of the given time, that is scheduling. And here this takes the form of various kinds of centralized management information system that can routinize the collection of information. So when you are breaking down into different schedules, then there is management information system is one such technique which also becomes helpful in this scheduling. This takes the form of various kinds of centralized management information systems. Management information about the management that is going on within the organization. And there is need for collecting or gathering information about that. That is Management Information System, or shortly it is known as MIS. So Management Information System can routinize the collection of information in a routine manner, in a routine manner. Okay, so and has been greatly improved by the use of computers. Yes, so MIS is also successfully successfully implemented by the use of computers. If computers, because we are now living in the age of what technological revolution, and technological revolution has increased the use of computers in almost all fields of human activity. Okay, so without computerization, we cannot survive. Nowadays, if we want better performance, if we want to accomplish a task quickly, then obviously there is need for this help of the computer. Humanly, or human power, or human labor is not that competent in order to master a task within a short span of time as a computer can do. So MIS also takes into account the increasing use of computers. Now comes the performance measurement approach. This is also another approach which is used in case of monitoring of policy. Performance measurement approach. The name is clear. That means you are going to measure the performance. Measure the performance of an organization or of a policy or a scheme or a program. So performance measurement approach is applied to know about the effectiveness and efficiency of policy delivery. Effectiveness, efficiency of policy delivery. So that can be known through this method or through this approach. That is performance measurement approach. Measurement is akin to monitoring. That means there is not much difference between monitoring and also measurement. It means watching performance indicators or PIs, watching performance indicators on all parameters with a view to detecting the earliest available signs of any deviations from desired results or performance. So, what are the indicators? Say, for example, some policy is designed in order to uh, address the problem of illiteracy in society. Illiteracy in society. So, there are different performance indicators. How many children are coming to the school? How many are dropping out? These are some of the examples of indicators. Indicators. Okay. Similarly, if we are trying to work, or if the policy is in the direction of, we can say, um, that is addressing the problem of hunger. Hunger. So, how many people are remaining without food, and what are their staple diet? What can be done in order to provide them their needed items? So, these are some of the indicators, these performance indicators on all parameters. So, what are the parameters on the basis of which a policy can be assessed? A policy can be examined. Okay, so and view as parameters with a view to detecting the earliest available signs of any deviation, and those indicators will help us in identifying the earliest indicators of deviation. So if at all there is any deviation, if at all there is any drift, that means we are going astray, we are not on the right path. Deviation कौन ना ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଠିକ track ରେ ନାହିଁ ସେଟାକୁ ଆମେ deviation ବୋଲି କହିବା। ତେଣୁ earliest available signs of deviation খুব ଶୀଘ୍ର ଯଦି ଜଣା ପଡିଗଲା ସେଟା, ତାହେଲେ automatically we can rectify our approach, ଯୋଉଟା କି performance indicator ଗୁଡିକ କରିବାରେ ସାହାଯ୍ୟ କରେ। So the Peter Jackson argues that measures of performance can provide an effective substitute for profits so as to improve the management of schools, hospitals, local government, other services. Jackson identifies a number of roles PIs can play, performance indicators can play in making for better implementation, such as increasing accountability, providing a basis for policy planning and control, supplying important information to monitor organizational activities, identifying the basis of staff appraisal system. So, this is the benefit which is derived from this approach, that is performance measurement approach. And these performance measurement approaches help us in this manner in identifying the early signs of deviation, early signs of deviation. And particularly this is helpful in these type of tasks or these type of works. What is that? Management of schools, hospitals, local government, and other services. So this is quite easy to identify what has been the rate of progress or what has been the extent of, we can say, delay or extent of non-performance in case of that particular policy. So Jackson believes that well-designed and implemented measures can enhance the value for money. We always want to realize that. That is an ultimate determiner. What is that determiner? Ultimate value for money. Okay. So ultimate value for money. How much we are going to spend, and if we are deriving the benefit out of it in a proper manner or not. If expenditure is more but the reward is less, then there is cause of cause for dissatisfaction. If the reward is more than the expenditure, obviously this is something, a sign of encouragement, so that we will be motivated to replicate or to repeat such type of tasks or such type of activities. So on the whole, performance indicators help to improve the capacity of the bureaucracy to control organizations and people. Bureaucracy, which is a structure of the state in public capacity, bureaucracy is an important, uh, we can say, machinery or important organ of the state to implement the policies or to carry out the functions. And the performance indicators help in assessing the actual performance of this machinery in the government organizations. So there are different performance indicators which will help in assessing or in measuring the performance of the bureaucracy which is involved in different capacities in different types of policies or schemes of the government. Then monitoring and control compliance. This is also another technique through which monitoring of public policy is done. So, Kenneth Boulding distinguishes between three kinds of power, that is, threat, exchange, and love. So, Kenneth Boulding, who has gone to explain the method of monitoring and control compliance, goes on to describe the role of three kinds of power which are used in connection with monitoring of public policy. These powers are power of threat, power of exchange, and power of law. So, power of threat is particularly here enforcement through threats can have productive and integrative consequences. For example, exercise of power by the income tax authorities. So, income tax authorities give you a sense of threat. They threaten that if you are not going to pay tax within a stipulated time, then obviously you are going to be punished. So, that is threat. So, through that threat mechanism or power of threat, monitoring can also be possible. Similarly, there is also the use of exchange. The use of exchange power may involve bargaining to settle terms of trade. This is bargaining. Exchange means bargaining, give and take. You give this thing, I will give something in return. That is bargaining. So, exchange means obviously this is a type of bargaining. Suppose if we lack in certain sense in the possession of certain resources for the realization of certain goals or implementation of policy, in that case we can go to search such type of objects or such type of commodities to be made available from somewhere else. So when we find such type of substances are available in some other source, then we make a negotiation. We try to exchange certain things for certain other things. That is exchange. And then there is also the sense of love, that is an appeal to a moral sense or sense of citizenship. Moral sense or sense of citizenship. What is your morality? If you have morality, then automatically you will be motivated to work for the organization. If you do not have morals, you will try to cheat in your functioning, cheat in your performance. That is morality. So, love, power of love is visible in these cases. In a sense, moral sense, or the sense of morality in a worker, and also the sense of citizenship. What is sense of citizenship? How or what is my capacity? I am a citizen of the state. I have certain responsibilities for the state, or I have certain duties, and it is my duty to perform those activities or those duties sincerely within a given time. That is sense of citizenship. Those who lack sense of citizenship, they are, we can say, they can try to uh, but cheat in different manners. So, morality and sense of citizenship, these are two, or these are the examples, or these are the uh, we can say attributes on the basis of which the power of love also works. So it calls for compliance on the basis of social and personal responsibility. So what is our social and personal responsibility? If we are socially responsible, there is no need of somebody else telling us to do this or to do that. We automatically will understand what is our sense of responsibility and we will accordingly perform. So that is uh, social responsibility and also personal responsibility. Personally, how much sincere, dutiful I am, that is my personal responsibility. In which capacity I am working in an organization, and obviously, if I am a sincere worker, then I have to give my best to the organization or to the accomplishment of a particular task. That is personal responsibility. So, for proper implementation and effective monitoring, effective functioning, Hood examines and identifies four modes of administrative enforcement and their effectiveness. This is by Hood. So he examines and identifies four modes of administrative enforcement. How certain activities or certain goals can be enforced effectively. So set aside or modify rules. So one thing, setting aside or modifying the rules. Government may choose either to set the rules aside or to modify the rules. So when there is the question of accomplishment of a task, obviously it can be done by setting aside the rules or modifying the rules. Okay, setting aside means keeping it apart and modifying where there is need for modification or correction. Because sometimes laws do not fulfill or do not corroborate the spirit or the objective of the policy goal. In that case, such type of laws need to be revamped or need to be revised or they are needed to be set aside. Set aside means keep it apart or keep it away from implementation. Then there is the spread the word. Government may choose to use publicity and persuasion, spreading the word. So proper information about the task to be undertaken within the organization. And that can be done through publicity. Publicity through different sections of the media, publicity, and also persuasion. Persuasion means molding the people to do something. That is persuasion. Okay, molding the people to do something. Then pursue and punish rule violators. This is also another technique through which this monitoring can be done. Food gives emphasis on this, that is, pursue and punish rule violators. If there are rule violators, those who are violating the rules, they must be pursued and punished. They must be tried to be found out and also punished. Make it difficult and impossible to break rules. This is also another important requirement. Laws need to be stringent. Laws need to be very strong so that anyone, while trying to bend some law or trying to break some law, will definitely be compelled to think twice before doing that. Okay, because that is possible in case when there is consequence of severe punishment or reprimand, punishment or reprimand. So make it difficult and impossible to break rules. That means the provision will be so stringent that a person will think several times before breaking the rules. one will not easily dare to break the rules. So this is also another method of compliance. Then Edgioni, he has also prescribed three kinds of power that provide a link between the enforcement of public policy and the problems of compliance within the organizations responsible for implementing it. So Edgioni has elaborated three kinds of power. They are first হচ্ছে কোন না people do so out of a sense of agreement, love or morality. Sometimes or some people are there who need not be need not to be uh, prodded or need not to be uh, regularly shunted in order to do some task. So people do so out of a sense of agreement. Some people are by nature they are very volunteering in nature. They do the work by themselves. That is agreement or love or morality. Some are moral beings, and we know all are not morals or moral beings. Some are also there who are very much immoral. So here, one thing monitoring can be possible through this uh, skill or this task. That is, people do so out of a sense of agreement, love, or morality. So in this case, monitoring is very easy. Monitoring is not needed at all. Okay. So in case of people who have a sense of agreement and who also love to do the work or who have a sense of morality, they need not be monitored in the task. They will do their duties by themselves. This is one. Second, they do so because of fear. Sometimes people also do something out of fear. Okay, if there is fear of punishment, then they are not motivated enough, but they are driven to do the task. So, first category is motivated people, morally upright people. Second category is they do something out of fear. They know that if I am not going to do this task, there is fear of punishment. I may be punished. So they do the task. Third category is they may do so because it is in their monetary or remunerative interest. Some do it for their benefit, monetary benefit. If I am going to get a salary or if there is some incentive, then obviously I will do the task or do the work. Why I am going to do the work? Because there is a system of remuneration. If I am going to do this work, then I will be rewarded financially. So that is also one type of we can say mechanism through which the monitoring of the task, monitoring of the business can be done. Enforcement may therefore be the consequence of a normative, coercive, or remunerative power. ତେଣୁ ସେଇ ତିନିଟା ଯାକକୁ କହି ଦିଆଗଲା କଣ ନା ନର୍ମେଟିଭ ପାୱାର ଯୋଉଟା କି ମୋରାଲ ସେନ୍ସ ଅଫ ମୋରାଲିଟି। ତେଣୁ ଯୋଉମାନେ ମୋରାଲି ଅପରାଇଟ ଲୋକ ମୋରାଲିଟି ଯାହାର ଅଛି they will be naturally motivated to work. ସେଟା ହେଲା normative power. Coercive power when there is fear of punishment, coercion. And third also remunerative when there is incentive or there is love for money, getting some rewards. So these are the mechanisms through which also monitoring can be done. Now let us examine about the constraints in policy monitoring. So what are the constraints? Monitoring is definitely there, but there are some constraints also. So constraints are first of all problems in monitoring relates to poor design. So this is first constraint, poor design. If you are not planning the task properly, then that will definitely not help you to accomplish the task in a desired manner. That is faulty design or poor design of the task. Then, second, time is a constraint for policy monitoring. Always time. Race against time. You might have heard about this concept or this idea, race against time. So, those who are working in any organization and they have been given a time frame, they automatically race against time. Sometimes the time may be too short depending on the nature of the work, and sometimes the time may also be very conducive or very beneficial. Generally, in case of public sectors or public enterprises, the time factor is not that daunting or not that imposing in nature. Time is almost, we can say, conveniently to be managed. It can be managed conveniently. Generally, times factorটা বেশি stringent থাকে কোଉଠି না in terms in case of private sectors. খুব কম ସମୟ ଭିତରେ ଗୁଡ଼େ task complete କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ. ତମେ you might have heard about these software professionals, computer professionals. If you might have known them or if you might have come in contact with them, you must be knowing how they are spending not less than 8 to 10 hours consistently. They will be sitting in front of a computer and they will be doing their work and until the task is not finished. So that is time constant. So constraint of time. But in case of public enterprises, generally there is a relatively a liberal attitude, a liberal approach. Time is not too daunting as it is in case of private sector. Then third is a common constraint for the policy implementation authority is availability of limited corrective actions for application whenever a program is found to be deviating in some respect from the projected performance. Deviation from the projected performance. What is the projected performance? What you have planned to achieve and what has been the deviation? How far there is deviation from the desired path. That also is another constraint. A common constraint for the policy implementation authority is the availability of limited corrective actions. You don't have enough corrective actions. You have very limited options to rectify yourself. If there is possibility of rectifying yourself, so far so good. If there are no adequate opportunities given to you to rectify your wrongs, then that is dangerous. Sometimes some people come to know about their mistakes little late and they are also willing to rectify them. But they find that ultimately they find that there is no more time to mend them or to rectify them. So that is also quite dangerous and that is also a constraint. Fourth is a pervasive obstacle to policy monitoring is ignorance on the part of the monitoring officials about its role and method. So those who are the monitors, those who will be monitoring, they must have the proper knowledge. Okay, ignorance. Monitoring is ignorance on the part of the monitoring officials. It is not that always those who will be monitoring they are sufficiently knowledgeable. It is not like that. So sometimes those who are given the responsibility to monitor the task, monitor the performance within an organization, they are not always properly equipped, properly qualified, properly trained. So that also works as a hindrance or an obstacle in policy monitoring. So there must be properly qualified persons in the monitoring team. Remedial measures for effective monitoring. So what are the remedial measures? How we can remedy or how can we rectify? Designing and monitoring system. That means any wrong or anything wrong in designing must be rectified, and it can be done. It can be possible. And also monitoring, designing the monitoring system. So redesign it. Monitoring system designed in a certain way which is found to be faulty can also be remedied, rectified, or revised. That is designing the monitoring system. Second corrective measure or second remedial measure is communicating about performance. You communicate. Those who are within the organization, they must communicate with each other about the performance of the organization or about the activities undertaken by different sections or different structures or different wings of the organization. Because within an organization, there are different sections, divisions, wings, structures, and every division or every wing must be in proper communication with the others. Proper flow of information and communication in between the different divisions of the organization so that it will be very much beneficial in proper monitoring of the task within the organization. Then monitoring progress. Continuously, there should be monitoring of the progress. What is the progress after completion of 1 year? What is the progress after the completion of the second year? What is the progress after the completion of the third year? This way. Or if it is a short-term project, then what is the progress after 1 month, after 2 months, after 3 months, like this. So that is monitoring progress. There must be a proper system to monitor the progress. What is the progress? Whether it is in accordance with the plans or not. If there is any deficiency, it must be corrected. There is monitoring progress. Then there is also improving capacity of the monitoring staff. These are possible. These are all possible. Capacity of the monitoring staff. Sometimes the capacity of the monitoring staff may not be adequate, may not be proper. So in that case, it can be done. Because in every organization there is one thing that is known as training. Why training is imparted? Training is imparted uh, in order to inculcate the proper skills, attitudes, orientations within the worker. So that can be done through a proper method of training. So improving capacity of the monitoring staff. So if the monitoring staff capacity is improved, that can also be very much helpful in case of what is known as your policy monitoring. Then taking some corrective actions. So how some corrective actions can also be taken in connection with monitoring of policy. Correction and improvement, replanning, cancellation. So these are some of the accepted principles within the system of policy monitoring. Correction and improvement. So if it is found that some activities or some performances have been wrong, then that can be corrected. When there is a mistake, there is a correction. Every mistake has the possibility of being rectified or being corrected. So correction and improvement. So when you are capable of correcting something, you can also improve that job or improve that task. Then replanning. You replan, plan again. If the planning is found to be inadequate, insufficient, not in accordance with the desired objective or goals, then there is need for a restructuring of the planning, redesigning of the planning, or replanning. Then there is also cancellation. Cancellation is also another method through which you can get rid of the wrong policies. Sometimes, if you find that some policy outcome has gone wrong, then in that case, there is need for cancelling that policy. Okay, so if some steps, some decisions, they are not yielding the proper result, they are not giving the proper result, they need to be cancelled. Okay, so that is cancellation. Now, coming to the next unit, which is also dealing with the same, that is monitoring of policy, public policy. There are certain, you can say, techniques here. Planning, for example, techniques like planning, allocation, implementation, measurement, evaluation, adjustment. So these are some other methods of, you can say, policy, public policy monitoring. So planning is intended to establish expectations against which the implementer of policymaker monitors policy delivery process. So planning is intended to establish expectations against which the implementer or policymaker monitors policy delivery process. Okay, so planning, that is very common in almost all organizations, whether it is public or private. They cannot escape planning. They cannot do without planning. Allocation means the application of resources to the policy delivery process. Allocation of resources, allocation of money, say for example, or allocation of uh, uh, particularly this is in relation to allotment. What has been the nature or the gamut or the extent of allocation of resources for the realization of a task or project, because without allocation of resources, without allocation of money, nothing can be done. Allocation means here allocation of money. Every project, plan, task, scheme can be successfully implemented only when there is proper allocation. Similarly, implementation. Implementation refers to doing the technical work planned in the policy delivery. That is implementation. This is a common technique or common method through which we always want to accomplish a task. Similarly, measurement. Measurement means observing performance indicators on all parameters. That is technical parameter, time parameter, or cost. So in terms of technique, if the technique is adequate, then our accomplishment of the task can be possible. Suppose there is need for a computer professional, and if you will take a person who is not qualified, then obviously it will not help us. So this is technical parameter. Technical parameter wise, an organization must be equipped with properly technically qualified persons. Then there is time. Time is also another indicator about which we have also discussed in the last unit. Time constraint. So time is precious, time is money. Sometimes there is a saying that time is money. That means if you are not accomplishing the task within the given time limit, then obviously you are going to lose significantly if you are going to fail miserably. So there is time and also cost. You have to be very much cost effective, or task must be very cost effective. What is the allocation and how much is the expenditure? If the expenditure is too high than the allotment, than the allocation, then it is dangerous. If it is possible to accomplish the task within the limit of the allocation, that is good, or which is opposed an impossibility. What is that? Accomplish a task less than, in an expenditure less than the allotted amount or allocated amount, which is almost impossible in any case. Then comes your evaluation. Evaluation is concerned with analysis of the factors associated with different levels of performance of a policy or program delivery. So, evaluation. We have already also discussed something about that in the last chapter. Evaluation. So, policy needs to be evaluated. Evaluation means whether pros and cons. What are the merits and what are the demerits? That is evaluation. If the demerits are more, then obviously policy has gone wrong. If the merits are more, policy is okay or right. Then adjustment. Adjustment means taking corrective action to resolve any deviation. Adjustment, if within the process of evaluation we came to know that we are going in a wrong direction, our path is divergent, not convergent, then in that case we can make course correction. That is known as course correction. We will abdicate the wrong path or the wrong approach, and we will take to the right path. That is adjustment. So techniques of policy monitoring. There are different techniques, that is technical performance including the use of human resources. So these are the techniques through which policy monitoring is done. One is technical supervision by technical performance. So how far or what is actually the extent of the technical function to be undertaken within the organization or in relation to the stated policy. So if there is too much of the requirement of technically qualified manpower, then accordingly steps must be taken so that there will be no surfeit or no deficiency of technically qualified persons in order to carry out the business. Then there is time performance, sense of time, technical time cost. So these are very common standards, common parameters on the basis of which this policy monitoring is done. Technically, whether there is any technical job, and if at all there is any technical job, whether we have technically qualified persons for doing that job or not. Second, which is time performance, that means a sense of time. We cannot relax. There is no scope for relaxation. When we are trying to implement a policy, that policy always comes with a time constraint. That means we have to finish that task within the prescribed time limit. If we are not completing it, then we are lagging behind or we are being defaulters. So that is also a major constraint or major determiner in connection with policy monitoring. Policy also can be monitored in terms of cost. What was the allocation? What has been the expenditure? Okay. So if there is a gross mismatch between the two, then that is dangerous. If there is conformity, if cost and allocation they match each other, then obviously this is a very good thing which has been possible. If there is too much of mismatch, then that is dangerous. So now techniques for monitoring technical performance. How the technical performance can be monitored. So there is provision of a technical team within every organization, or in order to accomplish a task, there must be a technical team. So if there is technical task, there must be technically qualified manpower, or which is popularly known as a technical team. And the division may hold the technical directors or heads of the directorates accountable for policy delivery performance. So very simply speaking, this is the requirement of having a technical division within every plan outlay or policy outlay. Okay, technical division which is composed of or which is constituted by taking all such technically equipped or technically qualified manpower. Then again this activity bar chart. Activity bar chart about which we have also discussed in the last unit. Then there is peer review. Peer review means here, peers means those who are your co-workers or co-equals working in other different organizations in similar capacities but in other organizations. So here they can also, peers are colleagues of the program implementing staff with more or less the same status. The peer review depends on or depends for its effectiveness on the knowledge, capability, and attitude of the peers. So peer review is one such important requirement. In connection with publication of articles, peer review is one important requirement. Similarly, in case of policy implementation also, peer review can be a helpful measure, helpful mechanism in order to monitor policies effectively. So here, peers or co-workers, co-equal workers can be requested, can be invited to make an assessment of the works of the workers within the organization in question. And they should have the knowledge, capability, and attitude. Without these things, peers are meaningless. Okay, so peers must be knowledgeable, they must have the capability and attitude to perform the job. What is the job? Job is to review. Review means to re-examine what has been the task, whether the work has been satisfactory or not. Then there is third party technical review. Third party technical review, something or someone outsider. The third party technical review works like a peer review, but people in it are largely unknown to those most intimately involved in the program. Unknown. So this is review by some unknown people, and those people need to be or they should be technically qualified. Not that anybody can be hired in the third party capacity to undertake the review process. Rather, there are also certain restrictions or certain, we can say, stipulations on the basis of which these third party persons they can be invited to carry out or to conduct this review process. Okay, and the important requirements are knowledge, capability, attitude. They must have the attitude to review the work of the peers. They must have the capability, not that anybody can be invited as a peer to make the review, and also they must have the knowledge. about the task or about the work. The third party technical review is something which is by those who are not known within the organization, largely unknown to those most intimately involved in the program. So those who are most intimately involved in the program or policy, their work can be reviewed, assessed, measured by the third party technical team or third party, somebody who is not known to these program performers. The main advantage of review by a third party is the objectivity and expertise which it can bring to the program. Objectivity and expertise. So these are the advantages of third party technical review. Then there is techniques for monitoring time performance. Time performance. The purpose of monitoring time is to ensure timely policy delivery. So policy has to be delivered within the stipulated time. If the policy is to be completed within 1 year, you have to complete it within that 1 year and you have to give it to the rightful stakeholders. Otherwise, it is meaningless. Okay, so time limit is very essential, very important in matters of policy delivery or policy implementation. So time in the context of a policy delivery is planned in the form of schedules. जो schedule କଥା ଆମେ ଆଗରୁ ବି ଆଲୋଚନା କରିଛେ. So the entire time frame is broken down into different schedules or stages. Okay, smaller period segments or smaller time segments so that assessment of the task can be easier, can be possible. Then there is also the skill or the technique of resource bar chart. Resource bar chart. So these are some of the additional measures through which monitoring can be done. In the unit 15, we discussed about some monitoring techniques, approaches, etc. These are some also other techniques which are used in case of policy monitoring. Resource bar chart. A resource bar chart is a useful monitoring device which helps to assess the impact of schedule delays. Schedule delays. So where delay has been caused. Okay. So if it is broken down into a monthly schedule, then obviously it will be easier to know which has been or what has been the delay in the given month. Okay, so that is when it is broken down into different schedules, each schedule will help in knowing what has been the nature of delay. If the task is not completed within the stipulated time, then obviously that schedule is something which has gone wrong. But the resource bar chart as a technique for monitoring time will have little meaning until the data is added so as to enable one to compare actual performance against expected performance. Actual performance against expected performance. Okay, so what is the actual performance and what is the expected performance? So if the actual performance is more than expected, it is good. But if the actual performance is lagging behind in comparison with the expected performance, then obviously there is something wrong and automatically there can be revision in the process or revisit into the process will definitely compel us to rectify the approach or to do something extra so that it can be completed within the stipulated time or expect. So there must not be sufficient gap between what is known as your expected and actual performance. Then there is schedule of expenditure. Expenditure is also broken down into different parts. Suppose total allocation is 100 crores. Then you divide it equally into different schedules. Schedule of expenditure, schedule of time କହିଲେ ସମୟକୁ divide କରିବା, schedule of expenditure କହିଲେ expenditure କୁ divide କରିବା. Suppose 100 crores, then you divide it into different types of activities, and each type of activity requires suppose 20 crores, 20, 20, 20, 20, 25 divisions. So 5 schedules of expenditure, and what was actually spent out of the 20 crores in the first schedule, 20 crores in the second schedule, 20 crores in the third, fourth, fifth. So that way it will be easier to monitor whether we are remaining within the limit or we are crossing the limit, going beyond the limit, because financial constraint is always there. We cannot have a free hand. Nobody can take a free hand in meeting the expenditure or doing the expenditure. So, schedule of expenditure, for instance, once one has budgeted the individual activities, the budgets can be aggregated by output. So, that is budgeted the individual activities, budgeting the individual activities. So what are the activities needed to be performed within the organization, and what is actually the budgeted amount for that activity, whether it has been accomplished or not, or what has been the output. If the output is something we can say not up to expectation, then there is something wrong. Then there are your techniques for monitoring cost performance. So in order to monitor the cost, what are the techniques? Because cost is one important parameter of policy performance or policy success or policy failure. Okay, so techniques are for monitoring cost performance. Whether you are spending the money adeptly, deftly, skillfully or not. If the cost or the expenditure is extravagant, then obviously you have to be blamed. So the best utilization of the resources, that is an important requirement. What are the resources available with you and how far you are going to accomplish the task within that stipulated amount. If you are transgressing, if you are uh, sufficiently surpassing the limit, then obviously you are not a skillful manager. You are not a skillful task master. So cost monitoring can be done by budget as a technique for policy monitoring. Budgeting. Budgeting is also universal. Budgeting is there in small and big organizations. Budgeting is there in public and private organizations. Budgeting is there in almost all organizations in the world. So, budgeting needs to be done very carefully. What is actually the source of income and what is the source of expenditure, or what are actually income outgo, where from those resources will come and how the resources will be invested or those resources will be spent. That is all about budgeting. Budgeting is also a very skillful business. If we are not planning the budget in a very careful, calibrated manner, then there is every possibility of money going in the wrong direction, money being spent in the wrong direction. Okay, so the budget of a policy delivery can serve as a tool for monitoring if it is compared to actual costs as they are incurred. So what is allocation? What is the cost? And what is the output? Allocation, expenditure, output. Therefrom, it can be easily known what has been actually the rate of success or the rate of failure. Used as a technique for monitoring, one would have to wait until the end of the program to see how well one predicted the program costs. So generally, this is a piece of advice that you wait till the completion of the project. Then only it will be easier to know whether the expenditure has crossed the limit or it has remained within the limit. By taking into account certain schedules of cost, you cannot actually know what has been the extent of progress or extent of success. That is why it is advised that one should, or those who are in charge of implementation of the policies, they should wait till the completion of the project, which will help in the process of making a proper assessment of the allocation and the expenditure. So a simple monthly statement can be prepared which can compare actual to planned expenditure for cost category. So these are some of the we can say techniques through which this cost monitoring can be done, whether it is on a monthly basis or it is on annual basis or whatever it is. So that is then cash flow projection. Cash flow projection. So this is also another technique, and that is the cash flow projection combines the parameters of cash, that is budget, and time. So what is the cash and what is the time? What has been the cash available at hand and how much time one is left with. So because every expenditure has to be done or made within a given time, not beyond that. It is useful in situations in which the authorities wish to monitor expenditures in comparison to income from donors. Okay, so what is income and expenditure? Whether that income is coming from donor or from the rightful government or from any other agency, that doesn't matter. Donor ଏଠି କୁହାଯାଇଛି କ'ଣ ପାଇଁ? Sometimes some money is also received from donors. Donors like donor agencies or donor countries. Hmm. So these are also there, these possibilities. Donor ହିସାବରେ ଆମର ଯେମିତି World Bank ହେଲା, DFID, Department for International Development, DFID. So these are different donor agencies which are also making some financial allocations for developmental projects all over the world. World Bank is funding different national highway projects in India. Similarly, in many other countries also, World Bank funds are being utilized for different developmental activities. So, combining performance criteria, combining performance criteria. So, what are the performance criteria? Technical criteria, time, that is another consideration, and also cost performance. So these are the different criteria which have to be combined together in order to make an overall assessment whether a particular plan has been successful, a policy has been successful, or a failure. So by combining together what technical nature of performance, technically how far the tasks have been successfully achieved or otherwise, whether they are successfully achieved or not successfully achieved. Then there is time, whether it has been completed within the stipulated time or not. That is also another consideration. And cost, whether it is involving the allocated cost or it has gone beyond the allocated amount, allocated resources. So that is, these are the three aspects which, when combined together, then the performance can be, or performance assessment can be in a better manner or in a more reliable manner. Okay, so because performance needs to be monitored. If performance is not monitored, not being monitored, then we cannot be in a position to know whether we have actually implemented the policy successfully or not. So, technical, time, and cost performance require proper monitoring to avoid any deviations from the planned policy delivery. So, there must not be any deviation from the planned policy delivery. What was actually the aim of the policy and what has been the rate of progress, whether we are very much closer to the target or not. And if at all there is a deviation, then deviation is dangerous. Deviation means you are far from the target. You have not arrived at the goal, and if there is a free possibility of severe criticism or reprimand. Now, coming to policy outcomes. So, what are policy outcomes? Successful policy implementation depends upon an appropriate match of three elements. So, whether policy has been implemented successfully or unsuccessfully, that can be known from three elements. What are those three elements? Inputs, outputs, outcomes. So, inputs, outputs, outcomes. Inputs कौन? Now, inputs constitute resources, whether human or material resources. Okay, human or material resources, or men, money, material. So that is input, and within bracket it is also mentioned personnel, funds, technologies. These are inputs. So what are technologies that are followed or that are made use of within the organization? What are the funds or what is the amount of funds that is available, or who are the personnel responsible for carrying out the policy? Okay, so technologies that implementers use to generate outputs. So implementers, policy implementers, they use the resources in order to generate output. Okay, so these outputs are, so what are outputs? Outputs are the actual decisions of the implementers. So what decision the implementers have taken, that is output. Okay, what decision have been taken by the implementers? Suppose in case of poverty eradication, so the decision was taken by the implementers to reduce poverty by 5%. So that was output in form of a decision. But outcome is something which can be known only after a dispassionate analysis or assessment of the policy. Actual measurement रे ଯେତେବେଳେ ଜଣା ପଡିବ ଯେ whether 5% has been accomplished or achieved or not, that can only know, that can only suggest whether the policy has been successful or not. Okay, so these outputs are the actual decisions of the implementers, and the concept of outcomes emphasizes on what actually happens to target groups intended to be affected by the policy. Target group. Who is the target group? Say, for example, in case of the problem of illiteracy. So, who are the target groups? Those who are the illiterate people. And there is plan to reduce their number, to reduce their percentage. So, they are the target groups. Okay. So, this is the concept of input, output, and also the outcome of the policy or policy outcome. So policy outcome means this is ultimately reflected in the the result of the policy. Whether the policy has been successful or not, that can be known from the outcome. So when we set a target of reducing illiteracy by 5%, and after actual assessment we found that the accomplishment has been 4%, then obviously that is the nature of the outcome. So outcome is, we can say, outcome is little short of the target. It is little short of the target, but not entirely discouraging or not entirely bad. Okay, so that is outcome. Now, so now we are approaching time. So I think we should wind up here only by mentioning about these few, that is effective policy monitoring mechanism. So this is the last part in this unit, effective policy monitoring mechanism. So what are the mechanisms? What are the mechanisms? Just a few minutes. We have 3 minutes left to the uh, ultimate time. So what are the mechanisms? Effective monitoring communication systems. So what are the communication system within the organization? Proper communication among the persons or among the different agencies involved within the organization. That is communication, sharing of information. Then enhancing administrative capacity for monitoring. This is done through training. You can increase the administrative capacity of a person by imparting training from time to time. That is enhancing administrative capacity. Designing standard monitoring instruments. So different techniques through which monitoring can be done, which provide good detail for good control of the policy delivery. Besides, performance criteria, standards and data collection procedures must be established for each of the factors to be measured. So this is, we can say, designing standard monitoring instruments that depends on a robust data collection, very sound system of data collection. Then only this standard monitoring instruments can be possible. Then delegation of authority, which is quite well known to us. Most of you might have been aware about this. That is delegation of authority, which is very well taught within the scope of public administration. So delegating authority, a superior will delegate the authority to a subordinate in order to do something within an organization. Then holding monitoring meetings, timely meetings, weekly meeting, daily meeting, monthly meeting, annual meeting, etc. Holding monitoring meetings. So this is also a very convenient technique of monitoring policy. And then there is involvement of the staff. How far the staff are getting involved in the process of implementation of the policy. Because if you do not get a committed staff, the staff members who are not involving themselves properly in a particular task, then that organization is not going to accomplish the task within the given time frame. Or what about the cost factor? Forget about that. Okay. So involvement of the staff is very essential. If you find a bunch of people who are involving themselves quite sincerely, then that can be very helpful in accomplishing the tasks. So that's it for today. Thank you for your patience for uh, remaining with me throughout these 2 hours. 2 hours. That is Bhavana, Bhavana, Shushobha, Vijayalakshmi, and some others. Of course, name is not given here. Anyway, so I thank you all.
So, sir, I have a doubt.
Oh
Uh,
yes, go ahead.
Sir, I wanted to know, is there any example of any policy failure, any familiar example, sir, in case any policy cancellation actually, in case of it is held?
You might have heard about different family planning measures.
Yes, sir.
Family planning measures, there are there is mention about different, we can say, techniques or skills. For example, your vasectomy, tubectomy,
Yeah.
and in some cases, it was detected that those approaches are not being successful properly.
Yes,
Even
sir.
in some cases, it was also detected that they are leading to some other health complications.
Yes, sir.
So, in such cases, if there are some such type of gross irregularities, mistakes, then obviously such policies can be cancelled, or they
Cancel.
can
Yes,
be,
sir.
yes, such policies can be revised, and that has been there.
Yes,
Similarly,
sir.
of course, it was not part of policy. For
Mm.
example, there were some instances of people. There was even debate about compulsory sterilization, or
Yes,
even
sir.
why about that. In case of poverty eradication, also sometimes we are targeting to reduce poverty by some percentage or some that percentage or this percentage, but it is
Yes,
also
sir.
not accomplishing
Mm.
the goal because because this now we can say the right approach is not adhered to. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so
Yes,
when
sir.
some measures go wrong, they need to be corrected or rectified or cancelled.
Okay, sir.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all.